Our topic is amnesia and its effects on memory.
Excuse me. Amnesia. We chose the topic of amnesia because when we learned about it in class, we became very interested in the topic. Also, one of our group members' grandmothers suffers from a mild case of amnesia due to severe epileptic seizures. These seizures cause short-term memory loss and have now developed into greater memory loss. Because of this is a very personal topic to us as well as it's relevant to the class because we learned about it. Why else is this relevant to the class? During this semester, Dr. Elliott taught us about the brain, its memory capacity and function, as well as several different memory disorders. We became very interested in the topic of amnesia during the memory chapter of this class, especially after learning about patient HM. Because of this study, we wanted to learn more about amnesia and hope that the class would want to as well. The study of patient HM. The study of HM is the main reason we decided to research more into the topic of amnesia. In this study, the patient HM suffered from severe epileptic seizures that his doctors were unable to control with medication. In a last attempt to improve his condition, surgeons removed part of the brain in which they believed the seizures originated, his left and right hippocampi. So we found this picture and it shows a normal person's brain, in which you can see the two hippocampi, and then it also compares it to HM's brain after his surgery, where you can see that both of the left and right hippocampi were removed because the doctors thought that that would reduce his seizures but it actually just caused memory loss. So after the operation, HM developed complete anterograde amnesia. He could store almost no newly learned information and had trouble recalling some information from the 11 years prior to the surgery, while memories from the first 15 years of his life remained mostly intact. He described every day as being alone by itself, whatever enjoyment I have had, whatever sorrow I have had. Amnesia. Amnesia is also called amnesic syndrome, and it is the loss of memories, facts, information, and experiences. People with amnesia usually remember who they are, however, they may have trouble encoding and storing new memories. Amnesia is typically caused due to damage to areas of the brain that are necessary for memory processes. In some cases, amnesia can be permanent.
Types of amnesia. Types of amnesia include anterograde amnesia, post-traumatic amnesia, retrograde amnesia, and psychogenic amnesia, also known as dissociative amnesia. Anterograde amnesia. Anterograde amnesia is the inability to remember new information. Research shows that anterograde amnesia results from a failure of memory storage and encoding. New information is processed normally, but is almost immediately forgotten, never making it into regions of the brain where long-term memories are stored. Anterograde amnesia can result from damage to the hypothalamus and thalamus and the surrounding brain structures, so that encoded memories are never stored since connections between the hippocampus and cortex are severed. Retrograde amnesia. Retrograde amnesia is the loss of memory from our past. Retrograde amnesia is most commonly occurs after extensive brain damage, including disruptions to storage sites, memory unification sites, and memory retrieval sites. It usually follows damage to the areas of the brain other than the hippocampus because already existing long-term memories are stored in the synapses of various different brain regions. Also, retrograde amnesia usually results from damage to the brain regions most closely associated with declarative memory, such as the temporal lobe and the prefrontal cortex. Post-traumatic amnesia. Post-traumatic amnesia is a state of confusion or memory loss that occurs immediately following a traumatic brain injury. The injured person is disoriented and unable to remember events that occurred after the injury, and may be unable to state their name, where they're from, what time it is, and other things such as this. Post-traumatic amnesia may either be short-term or long-term, but is hardly ever permanent. When memory returns, the patient is usually functioning normally. Psychogenic amnesia. Psychogenic amnesia is also known as dissociative amnesia. It is a disorder characterized by abnormal memory functioning in the absence of structural brain damage or a known neurobiological cause. It can result from the dissociation of a stimulus, whether voluntary or involuntarily, that typically occurs due to psychological trauma on the brain rather than from any physical or sociological cause. The symptoms and diagnostic criteria for this type of amnesia are outlined in the DSM-5. DSM-5. The DSM-5 symptoms and criteria for psychogenic, otherwise known as dissociative amnesia, are as follows. The inability to recall autobiographical memory associated with a traumatic event, a state of distress caused by the inability to recall traumatic events. There is no physiological cause for the memory loss. The memory dysfunction is not dissociative identity disorder, and the memory loss is not due to substance abuse or other substances.
Retrograde and anterograde amnesia study on rats. During our research, we found a study testing the effects of lacerations to the hippocampi formation on anterograde and retrograde memory on rats. In this study, researchers injected rats with a neurotoxin called NMDA into each hemisphere of the rat's hippocampi. For the surgery, the rats were allowed unlimited access to food and water for 2 days to familiarize the rats with their surroundings, their food, and the other rats. After these 2 days, the researchers deprived the rats of food for 23 hours before feeding the rats a special kind of cocoa-flavored chow. After a specified interval of time, rats were subjected to surgery. The final test occurred after surgery. 10 days after surgery, the retrograde memory test was performed. In the retrograde memory test, rats were offered 2 containers of food, one containing cocoa-flavored chow and the other containing cinnamon-flavored chow. The rats were allowed to eat for 2 hours. The bowls were weighed at 1 hour and then at the second hour. The rat's food preference was measured by the amount of food consumed. 5 weeks after surgery, the anterograde memory test was performed. In the anterograde memory test, the food each rat was given was the one they had acquired a preference for, i.e., if they preferred cinnamon, they were given cocoa. In this test stage, each rat was offered cinnamon and cocoa-flavored chow. The amount of food was measured at 1 and 2 hour intervals. They weighed to see which chow the rats preferred. The rat study results. In the retrograde test, the group with lesions had a higher probability of not remembering the sample food at all. In the anterograde test, rats with lesions acquired the food preference, but forgot faster than the control groups in the retrograde. The results showed that the hippocampus contributes to the formation of new information. Our conclusion: after researching this experiment, we believe there are a few ways we could improve the study. The study was slightly confusing to understand in terms of their methods and explanations. Also, in the research journal, there were some abbreviations that were not clearly explained, and therefore it was hard to follow in certain places. A suggestion would be to have one area in the journal that concisely explains all of the abbreviations in order to make it easier to understand the terms in the journal. And these are our sources.